Welcome back to Chat Like a Native. So what if I told you that the reason you freeze up when speaking English isn't actually because you don't know enough words, but it's, well, because your brain is treating the language like a math problem instead of a survival tool.
Oh, absolutely. That is such a common trap.
Right. And if you ever find yourself hesitating, just desperately translating in your head while someone stares at you waiting for an answer, well, this conversation is going to completely change how you approach everyday communication. Because by the end of this episode, you will know exactly how to bypass that agonizing translation phase and, start speaking English faster with way less hesitation in your real life.
Yeah, that hesitation is exactly what we want to eliminate today.
And the core idea we're breaking down right now isn't about drilling more grammar rules. It's not about grinding through flashcards. I mean, we've all done enough of that. It's about taking the English you already know and attaching it to the tiny, invisible choices you make every single day. Things like deciding what to wear, picking what to eat, or choosing your road to work.
Those little micro decisions are so powerful.
They really are. And to put this into practice immediately, we're going to use a really simple memory tool. It's just ACT. ACT. So you ask, you choose, and you tell.
I love that. Ask, choose, tell.
Exactly. You ask yourself a daily question, you choose an option, and then you tell yourself why, just using basic English. So we're going to explore the cognitive mechanics of why this simple framework is the ultimate shift for intermediate learners trying to achieve real fluency. Let's bring in our language expert to dissect this. We just promised the listener they can speed up their speaking, but before we look at the solution, we really need to diagnose the actual problem, right? Like,
Right.
why do learners who know so much English still hit a brick wall when it's time to actually speak?
Well, they hit that wall because they're caught in what we call the intermediate learner's trap. I mean, the listener we're talking to right now probably has a massive vocabulary, right? They can read a complex article in English without much trouble.
Oh, for sure.
They can watch a YouTube video and catch all those subtle nuances of the argument. They know the complex grammar rules. But the moment someone turns to them and asks a sudden, unpredictable question, something as mundane as, where do you want to grab lunch? The entire system just grinds to a halt. The fluency disappears completely.
Oh, I know that feeling so intimately. Let's look at the anatomy of that exact moment, because I think everyone listening can relate. You hear the question, and your brain just immediately formulates the perfect articulate answer in your mother tongue.
Always. It's instant.
Right. And then next, you start desperately searching your mental archives for the equivalent English words. And once you finally find them, you start analyzing the grammar. You ask yourself, wait, does this sentence sound strange? Am I using the correct preposition?
Yes, the mental gymnastics are just exhausting.
Totally. And after all of those mental gymnastics, you finally output a sentence.
And while that internal translation process might, only take 3 or 4 seconds, in a live conversation, those seconds feel like an absolute eternity.
Oh yeah, the silence is deafening.
It really is. And to understand why this happens, we have to look at how the brain actually stores and retrieves information. Because most language learners rely almost entirely on their declarative memory.
Okay, declarative memory. What is that exactly?
So declarative memory is the part of the brain that stores facts, rules, and explicit knowledge. It's where you keep the information that, say, the capital of France is Paris, or that run is an irregular verb.
Got it. So declarative memory is essentially a database. It's like an encyclopedia of language rules.
It is an encyclopedia, but spontaneous fluent speech doesn't pull from an encyclopedia, right? It relies on procedural memory.
Procedural memory, okay.
Yeah, procedural memory is the system you use to ride a bicycle or tie your shoes or drive a car. You don't consciously think about the mechanics of balancing on the bike, you just do it.
Right, it's just muscle memory at that point.
Exactly. So when you are stuck translating in your head, you are trying to use your declarative memory to perform a procedural task. You're basically trying to recite the physics of a bicycle while actively falling off it.
Oh, wow. That makes so much sense. It feels like walking into the Library of Congress knowing you own millions of books, like all the vocabulary, all the verb conjugations you've ever learned, but finding that all the books are just piled on the floor.
Yes, a huge pile of books.
Right. There's absolutely no card catalog. There's no filing system. The word for napkin or schedule is in there somewhere, but it just takes way too long to find the right book when a real human being is standing in front of you waiting for an answer.
And what do most learners do when they experience that hesitation? They assume their library simply isn't big enough. They think, I didn't know what to say, so I must need more vocabulary.
So they just buy more books.
Exactly. They go back to their textbooks and try to stuff even more books into that disorganized library. But the size of the library was never the problem. The solution is building that card catalog. You have to transition the language from the factual database of your declarative memory over to the automatic reflex-driven side of your procedural memory.
Okay, but if the answer isn't drilling more flashcards, how do we actually force that transition? How do we build that neurological card catalog?
We do it by attaching English to real-world outcomes. We basically hack the brain's relevance filter through tiny decisions.
Tiny decisions, like what?
Think about an average day. We make hundreds of small choices without even really registering them. Coffee or tea, the blue shirt or the black one, walk to the station or take the bus.
Or like, reply to this email right now, or just leave it until after lunch.
Exactly. These tiny moments are incredibly valuable because they provide a non-academic reason to think in English.
Which is a stark contrast to how we usually learn. Because in a standard textbook, you're usually reading a paragraph about, I don't know, an imaginary person named David.
Yes. Always David or Sarah.
Right. And you are doing a fill-in-the-blank exercise to help imaginary David choose an imaginary shirt for his imaginary job interview. But with tiny decisions, you are solving your own immediate problem. You are standing in front of your own closet thinking, well, the blue shirt looks better, but the black one is warmer. I'll wear the black one.
That shift from imaginary David to your own physical reality is massive neurologically. Your brain is a highly efficient resource manager. It deletes or archives information it doesn't deem necessary for survival or daily operation.
Because it knows David doesn't actually exist.
Right. It knows that whether you use the correct verb tense to describe David's shirt or not, there are zero physical consequences in your life. But when English dictates what shirt actually goes onto your physical body or what food actually enters your mouth, the language becomes personally useful.
So the brain stops treating English as a theoretical study session.
Exactly.
It basically transitions from an abstract math problem to a vital operating system.
That's a great way to put it. When language is tied to a physical action, like physically grabbing the black shirt after deciding to wear it, the brain engages motor pathways alongside the language centers. You are building thicker, faster neural pathways because the language is no longer just a thought experiment. It is actually grounded in physical reality.
Okay, but we need to figure out how to execute this daily without causing complete mental exhaustion. Because, I mean, if I have to mentally translate every single complex thought I have all day long, I'm going to burn out by 9 in the morning.
Oh, absolutely. Which brings us back to the ACT method. Ask, choose, tell. The priority here isn't complexity.
It's speed and simplicity, right?
Yes. The rule is speed over Shakespeare. The goal is to run through this 10-second ACT method roughly 10 to 30 times a day. Take food, for instance.
Food is a great one. We make so many food choices.
Right. It gives you dozens of opportunities. You look at a menu or open your fridge. You ask, what looks good right now? You choose and tell, that leftovers dish is too spicy. I'll make a sandwich instead.
Or deciding on a route to work. Ask, which way should I go? Choose and tell. Well, the bus is cheaper, but walking takes 30 minutes. It's too hot today. I'll take the bus.
Exactly. It literally takes 10 seconds.
It's kind of like playing a fast-paced multiplayer video game on a laggy internet connection. I mean, it doesn't matter how incredible your 4K graphics are if the game freezes every 3 seconds. We need to optimize the ping rate before we upgrade the graphics.
That is a brilliant analogy.
We have to prioritize smooth movement over high-level vocabulary. But, okay, there's a real friction here. What if I am in my kitchen trying to use this ACT method, and I just completely freeze because I don't know the English word for a specific utensil?
Like what, for example?
Like, say, a can opener. Standing there, I have a can of beans, and my brain just blanks.
Right, that happens all the time.
So if I just say, I need the thing that opens the can, aren't I training myself to sound like a toddler? I mean, if I'm aiming for professional fluency, isn't that a massive step backward? How do I actually acquire sophisticated vocabulary if I am actively practicing how to work around it?
I get why it feels like a step backward, but it is actually the primary mechanism for moving forward. When you are in the middle of a thought process, stopping to check a dictionary completely severs that procedural memory loop we are trying to build. Fluent speakers use circumlocution, talking around a word constantly.
It's a normal part of speech.
Exactly. If you say, the tool for opening this, you are doing exactly what native speakers do when they have a brain slip.
Oh, okay, so sounding like a toddler temporarily is a feature, not a bug.
It is a critical survival skill. If you
Because you can always look it up later.
Right. Once the conversation is over or your decision is made, you can absolutely go look up the word can opener and add it to your database, but you cannot let the search for one specific noun derail the entire cognitive process of thinking in English.
That brings up another hurdle, which honestly feels like a much bigger threat to this habit than forgetting a single word, and that's our own internal grammar police.
Oh, the internal grammar police will destroy fluency faster than a limited vocabulary ever could.
Really?
Yes, this is the danger of turning a simple daily choice into a highly stressful grammar exam. Let's return to the transportation example. You look at the weather, it's hot, so you think to yourself, I'll take the bus. But immediately your internal teacher wakes up.
Oh, I know this voice. Wait, is it I will take the bus or I am going to take the bus?
Exactly. Which future tense is technically better for an unplanned, spontaneous decision? And suddenly, your quick, practical choice has devolved into a university lecture on grammatical theory.
What is actually happening in the brain when we do that? Like, why does analyzing the grammar instantly kill our ability to speak naturally?
It comes down to cognitive overload. When you start agonizing over grammar rules, your prefrontal cortex, which is the analytical problem-solving part of your brain, gets completely hijacked by syntax checking. It takes up all your mental bandwidth.
So there's no room left for actually speaking.
Right. When the prefrontal cortex is overloaded with rule analysis, it effectively shuts down your brain's lexical retrieval system. You literally block your own ability to find the words.
It's like putting a toll booth in the middle of a high-speed freeway. You are forcing every single car to stop, pay the toll, and get a receipt before it can keep driving. And obviously the traffic backs up for miles.
That's exactly what happens.
So by trying to be perfectly correct, you are essentially training your brain to hesitate. You are building a neural pathway for pausing.
You are practicing the pause, and we don't want that. During this ACT exercise, communication must be the only metric for success. If your sentence clearly expresses your thought, just move on. Continue with your day.
And what if I'm making the same mistake over and over?
If you notice you are repeatedly making the exact same structural mistake, you can investigate that later during a dedicated study session. But in the moment, fluency requires movement. If you inspect every single thought with a magnifying glass before allowing yourself to act on it, you are hardwiring hesitation into your speech patterns.
Let go of perfection. Prioritize movement. Run through these simple 10-second choices in English 20 times a day. But once that baseline of speed is established and the ACT method starts to really feel natural, does this scale up?
What do you mean by scale up?
Well, speed over Shakespeare is great for picking a bus route or a sandwich, but it feels like it might fall apart if I have to explain a complex project workflow to my boss. How do we expand this habit to handle complex thoughts?
Ah, I see. Well, it scales up by chaining those simple thoughts together. Once the short choices feel easy, you build longer chains of logic using specific connecting words.
Like conjunctions.
Exactly. You start with because to establish causality. So instead of just thinking, I'll stay home, you add the reason. I'll stay home because I'm tired.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then you add but for contrast. I like this project proposal, but the timeline is too aggressive.
Yeah.
Finally, you introduce if for conditions. If they approve the budget, we will launch next week.
Wow, okay. So you are still using relatively basic vocabulary, but you are constructing the actual architecture of complex professional argument.
Exactly. You are building the scaffolding for that conversation with your boss. You're practicing cause, contrast, and condition internally without needing a whiteboard or a formal presentation.
And I understand that speaking these decisions out loud is also a critical part of scaling this up, right?
When you are alone, yes. You obviously don't want to do this in a crowded elevator and look like you're arguing with yourself.
Right, maybe not on the subway.
But when you are alone in your apartment or driving in your car, speak your decision out loud. Hearing the sentence sit in your mouth connects your internal cognitive process with your physical vocal cords. It builds muscle memory in your jaw and tongue.
It removes the physical friction of articulation.
Exactly, entirely without the pressure of an audience judging you.
You can also use this for daily planning, looking ahead to future events. Let's say you're going out to a dinner with colleagues later tonight.
Oh, that's a perfect scenario.
Right, so during the afternoon while you're just sitting at your desk, you can run through that future scenario in English. You think, what will I order? Well, I had a heavy lunch, so maybe the chicken.
Exactly. And then you use your conditions.
Yeah, like if they don't have it, I'll get the salad.
You are anticipating the choices you will have to make. You are giving your brain a preview of the vocabulary and the sentence structures you might need in a few hours.
It's basically a mental dress rehearsal. When you finally sit down at the restaurant that night and your colleague asks what you're having, you aren't translating on the spot. You're having the conversation for the second time today. The heavy lifting was already done 3 hours ago at your desk.
And a conversation always feels easier the second time. By using English to plan and make daily decisions, you are giving yourself a low-stakes, completely private first attempt.
Bringing this entire concept down to the listener's very next moment. The ultimate goal isn't to get better at practicing English, is it? The goal is to weave the language into the fabric of your daily life so deeply that it's instantly available when you actually need it.
Yes. You don't need a classroom, you don't need a speaking partner, and you don't need a free hour to sit down and study. You just need to attach English to something your brain is already doing all day long anyway, making choices.
So try it with your very next decision today. Even if it's just choosing what you're going to drink the moment this audio ends. Just remember, ask, choose, tell.
It really is that simple.
Imagine a moment, maybe a few weeks from now, where you are staring at two options, maybe two pairs of shoes, or two strategies for a work project. You weigh the pros and cons, you make your decision, and you move on with your day. And then you suddenly realize you just did all of that entirely in English, without your brain ever shouting, "Attention, we're using English now." What doors will open for you when the language finally stops being a subject you study and simply becomes the voice of your own thoughts?